What time is it? It's time for another Every Other Wednesday.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Come on in, and welcome to Every Other Wednesday. As the crowd is forming, and you probably have figured this out, I'm the only one here today, but not to fear, because we have a special pre-recorded session today, which we recorded 2 days ago with our special guest, Sam Yankelevitch. And so everyone except Mike is on that. So as soon as everyone gets here, we'll go ahead and roll the video. And some of you have been in sessions like this before where we've had to, because of the vagaries of everyone's calendar, we've had to pre-record the session and then we just record it. So the chat will be very, very active and open as well. It's just that Sam, he's pretty good, but he's not going to be able to respond to your chat comments. So I would encourage everyone to really look in and read those chat comments and be very active in that. That's where we find so often that the real learning takes place. I might be able to stop the video if I need to and make a couple of comments, but we don't have a lot of extra time built in. So again, welcome everyone. Today is Wednesday, March the 5th. And it's a lot of special days today. Normally, Mike Kerr is the one who tells us about what the day is, but he's not here today, so he has given me proxy to do that for him. So several things today. Wednesday, March 5th, 2025. First of all, in the Christian faith, today is Ash Wednesday. Today is also National Absinthe Day. Now, I didn't say Absence Day. I said Absinthe Day. Always drink responsibly. Also today is Dissociative Identity Disorder Awareness Day. It is also, and this is my second favorite of the day, and I think you're gonna see a little something here, but today is Kyrgyzstan National Hat Day. So if you want to know what a Kyrgyzstan national hat looks like, that is it. And my favorite one, though, is this one. Today is National Potty Dance Day. Yeah, awesome hats day, says Stephen. Thank you. So yeah, it's National Potty Dance Day, that potty dance that we do when things are really getting tight. But more to our point here, and there's a little bit of controversy about this, but one source tells me that today, Wednesday, March 5th, is National Employee Appreciation Day. Another source tells me that it is this Friday, the 7th. So again, a little controversy around that. Whether it is today, tomorrow, or Friday, if you have employees who work with and around you, make an extra effort to pay some special appreciation to them. So without further ado, I'm going to, Jenny says we chose to celebrate all week for that reason. Very good. Thank you, Jenny. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We're going to start the video. You're going to enjoy it. I don't need to introduce. We do all the introductions within the body of the video. So you're going to enjoy this with Sam Yankelevitch, and I'll say a quick goodbye at the very end. So here is Every Other Wednesday.
Hello, my name is Sanjay Nath, and I'm based here just outside of Toronto in Oakville, Ontario. I'm a speaker and author focusing on leadership and performance, and want to say welcome to Every Other Wednesday.
And I'm Richard Haddon, and I'm an author and speaker. I wrote Contented Cows Give Better Milk, and I'm in Jacksonville, Florida.
Wow, when we pre-record, we get really formal. So
I tell you what, yeah.
Right down to business. And I'm Jeff Tobe, and I don't know where I am. I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but I am currently staying in, where am I? In South Carolina, in Charleston area. And it's been a wonderful month. I'll be home next week, but in the meantime, you get backlight. Sorry, I can't do anything about it. So I'm just very excited about today's show, guys. And welcome, everybody, by the way. Sam Yankelevitch is a friend. I've been involved with Sam in his teachings in the last few months. I had the opportunity to hear him as an instructor over the past few months. He is a TEDx speaker. Popular LinkedIn learning instructor. I think I know you said over 750,000 global learners. I think it's closer to 900,000 now who have watched his courses. So that at times X amount of dollars. Sanjay, I'll leave that to you. He's written several thought leadership books on communication. But most importantly, he wrote a great book recently called An Interview with Failure. I highly recommend the book. Sam, I think, is going to tell us more about that. He's the CEO of Express Lingo Solutions. He helps organizations by the strengths of their people. He's sought after corporate trainer, spoken at national, international conferences. He is a recovering industrial engineer with a deep understanding of standard processes. Sam focuses on quality systems and communication needed to tie these together. Former VP of Global Operations with heavy emphasis on lean and quality management. Sam has mastered ways to align frontline with top management so that strategic objectives can be carried out right the first time to drive operational excellence. Sam, you should be getting paid more than you are from us with this kind of background, you know. Sam lives just down the street from me right now in South Carolina with his wife and borrowed dog. Maybe we'll hear about that. He admits, by the way, guys, that he's too old to grow up, too young to stop learning, and delighted to give back. Help me welcome Sam. Yay.
Thank you. Thank you for
Welcome.
that intro. Thank you, Jeff. Did well reading the Yankelevitch. That's good. You've been practicing.
Yeah, you know, I've had to say it a few times in the last few months. So I'm getting used to it. So, Sam, I want to know, because I know more about your background and your story, and you've been thrown out of a country at least twice. Would you tell us a little bit about that background and not so
Yeah.
such a formal way?
Don't be misled by the Yankelevitch. So I'm originally from Colombia, the country, you know, and you'll get a kick out of this one, Jeff, because just north of you is Columbia, South Carolina. So when I moved down here, which was the third time I moved to the U.S. or something like that, I came here to South Carolina from North Carolina and went to the DMV. And the lady asked me, my stuff, whatever. And she says, "You're from Colombia. You don't sound Southern." And I said, "Honey, I'm more Southern than you can ever imagine." But anyways, yeah. So I was born in Colombia. I left when I was like 9 years old, and I moved to Montreal, and I lived in Montreal. Yeah. I was there for about 5 years. Moved to Israel. I studied in Tel Aviv. I did my high school there, and then from there, I moved for the first time to the U.S. to go to school in Texas and back to Colombia to manage the company business. Which, by the way, nothing to do with the cartels. Because if it was anything to do with the cartels, I wouldn't be on this show. I'd probably be either 6 feet under or on a yacht somewhere, you know.
But it's
in an
binary,
undisclosed.
either or. There's no in between.
Right.
Exactly. Went back to Colombia. I worked with my grandfather, who, by the way, was my first mentor, and we were making locks and hardware, and that was back in the '80s. So if you've watched the Netflix documentaries on Pablo Escobar and the drug cartels and all that other stuff, we lived through that, and it got to be quite difficult. So I was married in '88, and early '89, I decided to move with my wife, and we moved to Florida, where we lived for about 6 years. And then, I don't know what we were thinking. We moved back to Colombia, and we're there for about, I don't know. Anyways, while we were in Florida, our kids were born. So when we moved back to Colombia, we had a family, and then we had to leave again. This time we went to the Carolinas, and so we've settled here. We've been in Greenville for about 27 years. And I ended up here because I was recruited to work for a German company, automotive company, and install their lean management systems. So that's how I ended up here. But yeah, Colombia was quite an interesting experience, for
Just
sure.
to clarify, when you say Colombia, we're not talking the British variety, right? We're not talking British Columbia?
No, nothing like Vancouver.
British Columbia? No, not quite.
Yeah.
But he did hit like Florida. He hit Montreal for you. See, so, and I'm in Carolina. So let's get down to it. What we wanted to talk to you about today is just daily work practices and messages from leadership on how to form and sustain the culture. I'd like you to tell a story, if you don't mind, and if you can make this one about 35 words or less.
35. You heard 35 minutes. 35 minutes.
But working on that airplane, communication, the story you tell about, was it Boeing? I'm not sure who had
Yeah,
contracted Germany to France. Can you tell that story quickly, just to kick us off?
yeah.
I think it'll
So
kick
I
me
don't
in.
know if Yeah, I don't know if any of you have flown in the Airbus 380, that double-decker bus, the big plane. You've done that, Sanjay. So you know that they serve bad food on the top level and at the bottom level too, right? But the story is, and
Showers.
some,
They have
yeah,
showers in that plane in a
yeah,
bar.
yeah, they do. Anyways, the story, in 2000, they were supposed to launch the first 380 in 2004. This is a joint venture between the French, the British, the Germans, and the Spanish, some influence with Italians and Portuguese. But that first plane did not take off on time. In fact, it was delayed by 20 months. And it cost that project was the overcost was approximately $6.1 billion, which is a lot of money. I mean, for me, it is. I don't know for you guys, I mean, but the thing that you read about this, and when you hear the French, the Brits, the Germans, and the Spanish trying to get along, you can get an idea for what could go wrong, and everything that could did. And it wasn't only language or cultural misunderstandings. There were political things as well. Everybody, all the countries were vying for more jobs, of course. So there was a lot of political stuff. But aside from the fact that they misjudged they said, well, we're just going to choose English as our language of business. Well, you well know that people, if they don't speak technical English for a project like that, it's just not going to happen. So they had a lot of issues, communication and cultural issues as well, corporate cultural issues. But the systems that they used to communicate, like I'm talking about their computer systems and their design systems, were also not communicating. The French were using a design system that was upgraded to the highest 3D, while the Germans were very comfortable using the 2D version. And this mismatch created a problem when they started laying out the cabling inside the fuselage. And when they started building the plane from the back to the front, in the middle, they found out that the wires were too short, as in no communication. And, projects like this, if you are a handyman, you might want to splice or solder or put duct tape. But on an airplane that's going to carry, 800 folks, 800 people, that's verboten. It's not allowed. And pretty much they had to scrap the project, rework, and that took 20 months or so. A lot of turmoil, political turmoil, a lot of egg on the face, embarrassments.
And
But
so,
that's
how do you think that applies to our audience, who are obviously not in a large, huge company like that, most of them, but
Some
it
of
is
them might be. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, and I know that, that the cultural issues are top of mind in these cases. Communication and culture really are, they go together, they go hand in hand. Um, and for what I've seen that applies to the lesser or the smaller companies that I've helped, very similar situations where you have leadership that doesn't apply psychological safety, so people can't speak up. And so what was happening at Airbus, for example, problems, everybody knew about the problems, the elephant in the room, but nobody got to talk about it and say, hey, how are we going to fix this? So this, covering up of problems definitely was a big issue. Also, I interviewed a bunch of folks that worked on that project, and a few of them told me that Airbus decided to hire ex-military managers. And ex-military managers know one way of managing,
Hmm.
command and control, no servant leadership. Um, and, so this drove people to hide things, not to be creative, no motivation or engagement. So they were not really committed. They were very compliant in a sense. And, you know, and so that's another lesson from stuff that I've seen in companies. I'm sure you've experienced this, where you have micromanagers and, the command and control. If you're in the military, that's the way to work. If you're also, if you're piloting a plane in certain cases, you got to have that structure. But for the most part in industry, it's uncalled for. You want to have engagement. You want to have people that actually participate and contribute.
I think
So
that's such a powerful metaphor, right? Like they just came shy. And
Yeah.
to your point, the knee-jerk reaction is let's duct tape it. And that is a temporary, not solid foundation solution. And that's why you got to scrap things and build them back up. So if I can, and I don't know how much detail you know about that, but so obviously they redid it and then Airbus 380 is up and running. So did it turn around or was it kind of slapped together and people went their separate ways?
What
no,
you
they
don't know,
they
what you
salvaged
don't
it.
know, Sanjay, is that it is duct taped. The one you were on, anyways.
It was duct tape. Yeah.
You duct tape it, didn't you, Jeff?
Sorry, Sam.
Yeah, I've seen duct tape on planes. But anyways, no, they actually they had to redo it. They had to redo the whole thing, and that means
I'm
they had
sorry,
to.
I'm not talking the physical plane. I know they redid the
Right,
plane. I'm talking
right.
about the organizational cultural issues. Were they addressed or did they band-aid it together and then move on to the next project?
They addressed some of it from what I heard. But so, and I asked that question, Sanjay, to because they have also developed the Airbus 340. So, you all know that, these companies will run their lessons learned or after action reviews, or, to gather what went well, what could have been better. And they did that. And some of it was salvaged. But at the end of the day, the politics were still top of mind because it was still the four countries, and you still have the political issues. So, I don't think they have overcome, even to this day, all of that.
Mhm.
It's and you see some of that as well at Boeing, with these projects. But yeah, Airbus for me has been kind of I've piggybacked on that story because there's just so
There's
many lessons learned from
a
that
lot
you can
there, isn't
apply.
it?
Yeah,
Yeah. And the thing that I think about, Sam, is, obviously they were just working along without really communicating properly with each other, and they got to that point and they saw that the things didn't quite get there. So then when they did it again, did they say, okay, we didn't communicate well last time, guys. Let's make sure that we do this time on this particular project so that we have a different outcome. Did they acknowledge that?
they did. Did they fix it? I don't know. So here's what I've learned. So I had an opportunity to meet a lot of the folks that participated in that project. Like I said before, I interviewed a few of them. They were working at BMW at the time, which is just up the street from where I live. But I also met a few at another aerospace company out in San Diego, where I was out there for about six and a half months helping an aerospace company. And the way they explained this is they did their lessons learned, but they didn't do something after the lessons learned, which is to do the 5 whys. In other words, you do your lessons learned,
Yeah.
and then you drill deeper to find out exactly what behaviors were driving this craziness. And so I can't tell for sure because I wasn't there, but based on what they've told me, maybe they didn't drill deep enough down to the behaviors. And if they did, they would have found out that it was, lack of communication, low collaboration, cross-functional team, all this other stuff that we know. And if they did, they would have then set the corrective measures for the next. And that's what I
Sam,
don't
talk
know.
to the. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I don't know if it was done or not,
Yeah.
Richard. So, I can't
Well,
confirm.
you mentioned the 5 whys. Talk to our audience a little bit about what that is. Some may be familiar with that process, others may not be. But it
Yeah,
really, as I understand it, is something that gets at root causes as opposed to simply symptoms.
right.
The symptom in your example was that the wires didn't meet in the middle. Um,
Correct.
I'm glad the folks who did the Channel Tunnel between England and France, maybe they had that worked out a little bit better. But talk a little bit about how the five whys works and why it works.
Yeah. So this is something that I learned, way back when from the Japanese.
Yeah.
So they apply root cause analysis because they are very, very disciplined disciplined in not going only on assumptions and opinions and stuff like that, but to drill deeper. So they have a way of asking questions, and it's for any and all contributing root causes, they will do a 5 why, which by the way is just a name because sometimes you do 2 whys, sometimes three,
Sure. Yeah.
sometimes you have to go down to 20 whys.
Right.
But it's always, why did this happen? Because, why did this happen? Because, why did this happen? Because. And as you do that, you start really getting down to the behavioral level. And this is what needs to be usually corrected or at least looked at, because that's what ultimately is systemic and is going to continue to drive the same problems. If you apply, like what Sanjay was talking about, if you apply a Band-Aid solution like duct tape, they know, the Japanese will say that's a temporary fix. We don't want temporary fixes. Our job is to make sure we prevent the same problems from happening over and over, because that is waste. And so this is something that they practice. They do the 5 whys. And by the way, there's a way to validate that the 5 whys are correct, because it's very easy to get sidetracked. And so once you get to a root cause, or what you believe is the root cause, you work backward with the word therefore. So because of this, therefore that, therefore that, therefore that, and as you work backward, you're thinking if it's logical. And if it isn't, stop and do the work again. And the 5 whys are not to be done in a silo. You do them with a group, with a team.
Everyone's input. Yeah.
Yes, from hopefully cross-functional, so that, so that is a very powerful and very simple, but very powerful
When I've used
methodology.
that, I explain to people if they're wondering, if they're having difficulty understanding the concept, I say, if anybody has ever had a 4-year-old, you can understand the 5 whys.
Yeah,
Because they ask you why once, and then, but why? But why?
But the root cause there is usually because I'm the dad.
Right, exactly. Yeah, because I said so. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because when I took the Airbus 380, it was actually, I was going to see a client in the Middle East in Doha. And this is, if you don't know Doha, back then, this is like 2010. Their population back then was about 1 million people, of which 800,000 were expats. So you had diversity coming out the yin yang, and the organization I was working with had something that I don't remember, they used to brag about it, but like 52 different countries, nationalities, and they were a huge company, and they really seemed to piece it together. So you had just the opposite of what the experience here is, people being understanding that, you do it a different way, I do it a different way, but can we kind of speak the same language and meet in the middle, literally? So you see both. It is possible to do it.
Yeah, excellent. That's an excellent observation, Sanjay. And if you look at Doha, or if you look at Singapore, where you have all that diversity, they have built systems to make sure that there is inclusion and that people are working a certain way. Whereas other companies don't pay attention to that, and
they lose out. They really lose out.
I think we're here in the States, we're not allowed to talk about inclusivity and diversity.
What is that? What is that?
But I do have a question, Sam. So you've worked with various companies. I know a lot in the automotive industry, but aerospace and other organizations. So at this point, how do you define culture? And how do you use that definition to help organizations transform when they're going through change?
Yeah. So culture is that big C word and so abstract and fuzzy, and there's so many definitions. I don't think there's a right, or wrong. I'll answer this way, Jeff, because for me, I like to look at culture in a way that it can be somehow transformed or changed for the benefit of the organization. So that it's not just a theory. So what I've seen and what I've learned based on my lean background, lean thinking and Japanese, it's about the work practices. So, a lot of folks say, It's how we do things around here. And I always ask them who is we?
Right.
How is the work practices? Who is the we? And then do things, what things? What is it that you do? What's the outcomes? Or you can also name it as how we get stuff done, you know. And so I've learned that certain work practices, when they are followed in a disciplined way, are going to create a better opportunity for what I call predictable outcomes, you know. And predictable outcomes might not be the optimum outcomes, but at least you know where things are going to end up. Whereas chaotic business practices are going to end up wherever, wherever
Wherever.
you're out of control. So, and when I talk about business practices, and I love that word practices because that's how we practice together on a daily basis. And practice makes habits, right? And so what am I talking about? I'm talking about how we run our meetings and what we see as far as the purpose of the meetings, how we do our problem solving, how we communicate, how we do our onboarding, you know. And I've learned a lot about onboarding from other countries, like in Germany, where they have or they have the Meister system, where somebody actually will bring the younger folks, take them under their wing and mentor them, sometimes tormentor them. But it's always looking for the benefit of the person, for them, to coach them and grow them. So these are the work practices. And let's go back to the tape, the duct tape. So duct tape is a work practice because it's putting a Band-Aid. Now, if the leadership of the company says, "Great job, you're a hero, you put a Band-Aid on there," then leadership is also then driving what work practices are accepted and expected.
Yeah.
And this is a problem because now they're saying, "Oh, you're a hero if you're putting the tape," or if you're using WD-40, those two things that people say that they solve everything. So, in most, a lot of the companies that call me that are in trouble are ruined because leadership has been rewarding workarounds and these fixes, these temporary fixes, and they don't drive systemic problem solving because they don't have time. And it turns out they don't have time because they're chasing their tail,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
So so in a nutshell, I know I'm talking a lot, Jeff, but I'm sorry.
Okay.
So it's the work practices. It's about the work practices and and what leadership rewards, what leadership tolerates, where they spend their time, where leadership spend their time, where they spend their resources. That's going to tell you what the culture is going to be like, and you could pretty much anticipate.
I notice you haven't used the word results. And I think you do that on purpose, right? Because so many of us are in organizations that are focused on results. And
Yeah,
one of the things that I heard you say when I heard you lecturing is you can't just focus on results. There are other steps to get you to results. And I think
yeah,
that's what you're saying here with business practices, correct?
yeah. Well, that's because, Jeff, that's because, so we're all in the West, right? In the West, we focus on results. The Japanese focus on the process.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they
Right.
focus because they know that if you have a good standard process, then your outcomes are going
Results
to
will
be good.
take care of themselves, right?
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
And so and so so Kaizen, if you've heard of the word Kaizen, for example, which is continuous improvement, Kaizen focuses on improving the process and therefore tying that to, good processes, standard, stable processes with consistency. They're going to drive consistent results. And they also, by the way, focus on the people. In fact, it's all about the people because the people are the ones that are going to set up your processes and keep them stable. And so this is just key, and it sounds so simple, but in the West, I think we lost our way in a sense, even though you know we're we're living in the richest country in the world here, right? And it's the most abundant country, the stock market and everything else, which is kind of a paradox. But that, but that has a lot to do with startups and that kind of stuff that's going on, and the VC capital that is available for startups. But if you don't focus on process and the people, then it's just hit and miss. There's no predictability, and I think predictability is important.
So like
that
you, I have an engineering background as well, and I love numbers, and numbers
Feel
don't
sorry
lie.
for you.
That's all right. I'm recovering. Therapist says it's fine. But this idea of the reason process is more important than results, it's like you're the house in a casino. And over time, if you have the advantage, you win. Now, it doesn't mean if you open the first day of the casino, someone can hit a jackpot and you're in the negative. But over time, because the probability is such that you will win time and time again. Or, I mean, for the mathematical nerds, the concept of expected value. You have a positive expected value when you have a good process. You have good people and a good process. And yeah, projects are going to fail and there's going to be mess ups, but over time, you're going to have more wins and losses.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Yes, very, very true.
First thing that I thought about when you said about the focus being on processes and people. Now, what happens when we inject AI into that situation, which may be very process oriented, but it minimizes the input of people in the same way that we've been thinking about that? I don't know. What thoughts do you have about that?
Yeah, interesting. So I use AI all day.
Yeah. I do too. Yeah.
I'll give you an
I
example.
don't use it in place of people. I use maybe it in place of me.
Well, but you look. So I was in Detroit last week. I got suckered into one of these things where I got called in to do a project, and so it's just a company that's in a mess, okay? And so one of the things is when you have these situations where all day it's chaotic, and you're asking them to do something else, like go in there, let's do some systemic problem solving. Well, we have no time. So now, to answer your question, how do you find time? So one way is to find out where they're spending their time, which is usually in stupid meetings.
Right.
Which is called meetingitis. And it's a sickness, and there's a way to fix that. But the second thing is, if you can find a way to get AI to help them do some of the stuff that takes them a long time, which I'll give you an example of what we did, then they free up a little bit of their time to do stuff where they need to use their noggin.
Where they can do that. Yeah.
They can do that and it's strategic, because it's not the day-to-day chasing your tail, it's strategic. So I'll give you an example. They called me in, I'm coaching. They say, oh, you're the consultant. I say, I hate that word because consultants have got kind of a bad rap. So I said, just think of me as a trainer and as an advisor. And so I go in there, do 20% consulting, and then I find out what their issues are. And then I design a way to really go in there and coach the people. And I coach them by doing. And so we're solving a problem. And when they said, well, we don't have time to write the standard work. I said, well, how long does it take you to write the standard work? I said, for the instructions of this new process. Oh, it's going to take us a couple of weeks. I said, let me turn on my AI engine here. And I asked the AI engine, hey, could you please write a quick framework for a standard operating procedure that will cover this. I gave it a bunch of details. And within seconds, we had a framework and everybody's jaw dropped, and I said, guys, I'm not inventing anything new. Get on with it. This is the 21st century. And by the way, most of the folks in the room were in their 30s and 40s. I'm 66. I said, why is this old guy having to show you? And I feel sorry for them because they just don't have time to tinker around with AI. So I don't know if that helps, but it's like
that's a great example, a great way of displacing our time and putting it into something like AI so that we can make a better use of our time, and
Exactly.
It still emphasizes both processes and people.
Yeah. And we shouldn't be afraid of it.
Right.
Sam, you brought up meetingitis, and it reminded me of something. You have some great made-up words that will you share some of them, because just the word brings a mental picture of what happens in culture
Yeah.
every
So the
day.
so yeah, I do make up words all the time, and I use them in my training. So, for example, strategy. The word
Tragedy.
strategy,
Tragedy.
right? You already know what that means, right? Just from the
Right.
word, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
and by the way, I learned that because I worked a lot in Mexico. My role here in the Carolinas for this German company was to build a company in Mexico and manage it. And so the Mexicans had a hard time pronouncing the word strategy, and they kept on saying strategy, and I wrote it down. And then recently, I started using that as a training tool. You know, there's another one called performance.
Poor
Poor
performance.
performance. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
just
Why
performance.
have two words when we can have a portmanteau
Yeah.
that we all know what it means?
So yeah, so I go in and I do my consulting and they say, so what do you see? I said, I see performance, and it's because of your strategy.
And then you bellow, and then we're done.
And so it makes me think, is just kind of okay performance? Could we call that performance?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
You can
That's,
make up your own words, and have
yeah.
fun with it,
Richard,
and
that's
then
usually Sanjay that's doing that. Good for you. Yeah.
yeah. And then
Well,
by the way, and one last word I leave you with. So that I give you, and I have some other ones, but I go in there and I say, your situation, what you're practicing is Neziak. And they said, Neziak, is that a Japanese word? Well, yes, it is. It means Kaizen backward. It's written
uh,
Kaizen backward. And
yeah,
so instead of continuous improvement, you're practicing continuous containment.
right. I
Yeah.
love it.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
Sam, tell us about this book. Tell us about the book, an interview with failure.
Oh,
yeah. Wait,
yeah.
sorry, was that
So
based on a conversation you had with Jeff?
Yes. Anyway, it's not a business book, right, Sam? And tell
well,
Oh,
us
it
about
is
that's
and
even
it isn't.
better.
It is and it isn't, because a lot of the folks, when you go into companies and you hear from people that, they don't want to try this because they don't want to be a failure. And you talk about, for a lot of folks, it's like it's just a bad word. It's a very negative, bad F word. And so I don't know. It dawned on me. This happened like 5 years ago. I said, well, I'm going to write something about failure. I couldn't find the voice. And finally, I said, well, what would happen if I pretended I'm a podcaster, like what you're doing, and I will give failure the spirit of a person. I'll bring failure to my studio and ask it a bunch of questions and get the answer straight from the horse's mouth. And so, it puts you when you write, and I think that you're all authors, when you're writing, things flow and
Mhm.
it just flowed. And I was able to put this book together. It gave me the idea to do the TED Talk, which I did last September, which was a lot of fun. And I was pooping in my pants when I did, but that's a different story. I was wearing my Depends, so it all worked out.
yeah, really.
Uh,
You are an old guy, so
But yeah, so and then failure pretty much replies back to the questions and explains what failure really is. And it's interesting because in social media you read a lot about fail fast, fail safe, fail forward. Don't think of failure this way. But for a lot of people, it's ingrained in their brain that it's a bad thing, especially if they were beat up by somebody they trusted when they were young. And so it's
What are a couple of lessons we can learn from the book without reading it, which will make us want to read it?
yeah, thank you. So the first thing is that failure answers, I'm just a word. And then and then failure answers, words don't carry meanings. You and I do. As humans, we carry meanings, which means at the end of the day, you can apply whatever meaning you want to whatever word. Oh, and you can make up your own words too. Like I showed you a couple of words that you make up. So that's, it's just the book is really about the use of words and language and how language and talking to
Mhm.
yourself
Yeah.
influences your behaviors and stuff like that. And it's really, I'm trying to get anybody that will read the book to shift their mindset and stop being afraid and take the leap. And then something that it's in second edition. I'm going to do a third edition now based on stuff that I'm learning. and these are self-published. So I don't know, you guys self-publish, you go in there and you make changes on the fly and republish, right? It's not like you have to go to a publisher. So
And
one
it's
last
not
thing
like it's
is,
not like the first two were failures, right?
well, because it doesn't exist. Failure
Right,
is
right.
Yeah,
It's just a
in
word.
fact,
you're saying, this idea of we can define the words. It reminds me when I was in my undergrad, I went from high school that I, aced tests constantly. And when I was acing tests in high school, I got 100% on everything. Then I got in first year of engineering and I got humbled. And a very good friend of mine, him and I were like, we used to get hundreds on everything. But now we never ace tests. So we decided we were going to change the definition of what it meant to ace a test. So we changed it, and the new definition was you answered all the questions. So we come up with the test. Did you ace it? Yep. Did you pass? I don't think so.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm going to add, by the way, is to your point, Sanjay, is that so in the back of the book I have like an appendix with the references of the original wording that comes from French, from the word faillir. And the original meaning of the word faillir was something that was left incomplete, that is incentivizing you to finish and to take action, not to quit. And failure in the 1500s became a negative word because of physics, chemistry, and biology, where you had to solve problems, and it was just a difficult thing. And so it just changed the meaning of the word. And once it got to some cultures, the cultures really just crazily changed the meaning to a negative thing. But it wasn't meant to be a negative. It was just meant to actually challenge you to finish something.
When I interview clients and we're talking about getting outside their comfort zone, the two things that always come up, I can count on them in any organization, are fear of failure and fear of the unknown. And to me, both of those are, well, to me, they don't really exist. So I'm glad to hear this, because failure is just a nagging possibility that keeps us motivated. So it's a word, and the same with fear of the unknown. That should be exciting. It shouldn't be a scary thing. So it's all perspective.
No, certainly nothing in the future is known at all.
Right.
Yeah. Wow.
And by the way, the whole idea of fear of failure has to do with, it's not, ask why. And it's about, oh, I'm going to look stupid. Oh, I'm going to lose income. Oh, I'm going to lose respect. Oh, so we don't care about failure. We fail all the time, right?
Right. We care about the results, the consequences.
Pick your sports analogy. Yeah. But we fail all the time.
Well, the challenge in organizations is that they've never debriefed failure. So it's become a bad thing. Somebody got blamed somewhere. Instead of saying, okay, we failed. What did we learn from it? What lessons are we going to take, and what business practices are we going to change so that doesn't happen again? And that's all it would take, but it doesn't happen in organizations, big or small.
Often
let me tell you what I learned, Jeff, to your point. I was at a Toyota facility in Indiana last year in September. I was speaking at a conference, and we went to do a tour of a facility they have that does material handling. So they build these material handling machines and material handling equipment. And we did the factory tour, and the guy that was taking us around said, I have to ask something from somebody. And I don't know if he was for show or what, but he said, we haven't heard of a problem for 2 days, and that is a problem. And so that's the Toyota model is no problem is a problem, because when problems are not brought to the surface, they remain hidden. They don't go away.
Yeah. Doesn't mean they don't exist. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, and by the way, and a problem that is ignored, problems hate to be ignored. Okay. They will come back. They will join forces with other problems.
They're like 4-year-olds too. Yeah.
Yeah, Sam.
Exactly.
I got your next book. I think it should be Interview with a Problem.
Yeah.
I think that'd be a great one.
And then after that, you can do Interview with a Vampire.
Yeah. So we're down to our last couple of minutes here. What can we say to wrap all of this up?
Well, I have one more question for Sam. Who have you been your mentors? And you mentioned mentorship, and I'm big on mentorship.
Your grandfather. We your grandfather. Who else?
Yeah, for sure, your grandfather. And maybe instead of who have been your mentors, more importantly, because we only have a minute, is why is mentorship so important in every culture?
Yeah. So yeah, my grandfather was my first mentor, and then after that, I've had some Japanese mentors. Masaki Imai, who was a very famous guy, that was one of the first instrumental people that built the Toyota culture. Um, but what these guys do is they actually challenge you how to think. They don't give you the answers. They're very tricky, elusive. They make you think. Critical
Almost
thinking.
Socratic, kind of a Socratic method.
Very Socratic, absolutely. And so this critical thinking really is what develops you to actually, it challenges you to take a leap, to go out there and try things and be ready to get slapped, because boy, these Japanese guys, they will slap you and they will tell you that you got to try harder, and stuff like that. So it's really forming a way of thinking. Um, I had an opportunity to see this in the German company where they had the Meisters, and the Japanese use dojos, which are kind of similar, but the Meisters will not tell you the answer. I don't know, Sanjay, when you went to engineering school, did all the books have the answers in the back? Because
Absolutely.
because that was me in Texas. I went to, I'm an industrial engineer. All the books had answers in the back, and then I got to work, and the answers were not anywhere to be found. You had to go, and that's what the mentors. I see them, that's kind of their thing, and take somebody under the wing, challenge them, and
Ask
that's
them
part.
the questions, and then if they absolutely can't get the answer, then the mentor becomes the back of the book, right?
Right. Or their
Sometimes.
Rolodex does.
There you go.
People won't even know what that is. Some of
I
these.
know. Well, and speaking of not Rolodex, but Rolex, if I had a Rolex, it would be telling me that we are out of time. I can't believe this. This is what happens every single time. So, Sam, we just really thank you. I'm going to let the other guys thank you as well.
Yes, thank you. Again, I love the pragmatics, the real life examples. Again, this to me is
that was
metaphor.
Perfect.
And I want to say thank you for that and bringing a lot of the stuff that we know, but bringing it to life with pragmatic
A
examples.
great way to think about things.
And I knew we wouldn't have enough time for Sam. Sam's got lots more. He's also an expert, by the way, on accountability, which we should have him back, because we all know that accountability is huge with corporate culture. Sam, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. And we'll see everybody when, Richard?
Every other Wednesday. Thanks. Bye.
Cheers.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the invitation.
Hey, thanks.
This was fun.
All right. Thank you again. We are out of time. We'll be back on March the 19th. See you then. Thanks for being here, everybody.